First of all, thinking Lashon Hara is really not the Aveira of Lashon Hara. The Aveira of Lashon Hara is speaking Lashon Hara. So you could say that it's not completely pure, but you cannot call a person a Rasha when he thinks Lashon Hara. It's maybe inappropriate, but it's not. What makes something appropriate and inappropriate is clearly not what someone believes inappropriate, is what Torah defines, which is inappropriate. I think about eating something which is not kosher. It's not particularly pure, because why would you think something when someone, Hashem says, do not, it's not a good thing. Why would I want to think it? But that's not the issur of eating treifus. Eating the issur of eating treifus is taking something which is treif and consuming it physically. So that is the Aveira. Now, I could have a taiva to do that. In other words, I could go through a restaurant. Now, truth is, by among fruma people, the taiva it doesn't express itself all the way to the end. In other words, no two people or no two type of people have the same desires, but there could be a desire. A person's hungry and he walks by something and he knows, or let's say it's not 100% trade, but it's not something he would usually eat. So there is a temptation to go ahead and consume that. So the temptation itself is just normal. I'm hungry. But to go ahead and actually take it and eat it, something Torah says do not, that is the Aveira. So when one thinks about not eating kosher, it's eating not kosher, it's not something. Why would he want to think about something which is not aligned or is contrary to what the Eivishter wants? It's maybe not a perfect
scenario. So he can't
scenario.
be a tzaddik then?
Well, he's not a tzaddik. He's for sure not, because a tzaddik doesn't even have a temptation to do anything wrong, or to speak anything wrong, or to think anything wrong. That's why the tzaddik is something so special. He doesn't even have the temptation. The average person does have the temptation.
So if I think of something wrong in my head and I don't carry it out, what does that make me?
So the thing is, it goes like this. When you think about something in your mind, it's more when you say to carry it out is more not so much the mind to the thought, speech, and action. It's more the heart to the thought, speech, and action. Because when you think about something in your mind, for example, to speak Lashon Hara, it's not so much you're thinking in your mind. It's something you have a desire to speak Lashon Hara. The person has a desire to speak Lashon. It's more
or I have a negative opinion of this person.
Exactly.
I keep it under wrap in my mind.
So you're not a Russia at the time.
I'm
because
not a Russia.
It's not, like I say, it's not particularly the interest. Where does the interest to speak something which is negative about the other person, where does the interest come from, rather? To speak negative about another person. Where does that interest come from? Everything is good. Why would I want to? Because the heart, the animalistic dimension within us, which we know is the nefesh bahamis, which by the Beinoni is completely intact and completely, in other words, it was never transformed. Not only never transformed, like we say that tzaddik has transformed his nefesh bahamis, or shunned the nefesh bahamis, brought down the nefesh bahamis at different levels of tzaddikim, but the Beinoni, the nefesh bahamis is completely intact, like every human being, as we said the other day, every bum on the street. His nefesh bahamis is all the way there with any taiva, desire, temptation to do, speak, or think something which is contrary to Ratzon Hashem. So when you think about you say Lashon Hara, when you say that you want to speak Lashon Hara, it's not that it's in your mind, your thought is telling you to speak. It's your heart is telling you to speak. You have a desire. You simply have a drive. You have to close your mouth. You have to control yourself. From what are you controlling yourself? You're controlling yourself from the signal which your heart is presenting. It's a good opportunity to make yourself feel good to speak bad about the other person. So the taiva is there. So when the taiva is there, it doesn't make you a rasha. But when you implement, you allow the taiva to cross, right? There's a threshold between the taiva, the heart, and the thought, speech, and action. So when you allow the taiva to implement itself, to become real, in other words, to cross that threshold and say yes to the taiva. How do you say yes to the taiva? So it all depends in what you're saying yes to. In the Torah, there's certain aveiros which are associated with speech, or let's start with action, right? Speaking about eating treif, it's not particularly noble, it's not particularly spiritual, it's not particularly the ordinary, or not. It's not particularly something which is it's a good thing. Obviously, Hashem says, "Do not." Why would you speak about eating treif? But that's not the way you transgress. You do the Aveiri, or in this case you become the Rasha by speaking about eating treif. Because eating treif, just a moment, eating treif is something defined by Torah, is when you consume it. Similarly, speaking in speech, there's certain Aveiros that are associated particularly with speech, which is speaking Lashon Hara. When I think about Lashon Hara, it's not a good thing particularly, but it's not the Aveira of speaking Lashon Hara. Aveira of speaking Lashon Hara is when you verbalize the words other people hear, and that causes the commotion, whatever Lashon Hara causes. That is the Aveira. So the temptation to speak Lashon Hara, that's normal. Hopefully one day we will explain ourselves. It says in the end of the day, a person has to try to explain the core of Nefesh Bahamis. Don't try to express it, don't push it all the time. But let's say he didn't explain, let's say he didn't even touch or make a dent in his animal, so he always has the taiva to speak Lashon Hara. Still doesn't make him a Rasha. 10 years later, 10 years he has a taiva to speak Lashon Hara, and 10 years later, 20, and a year after those 10 years, he still has the same taiva. So it's already 10, 15, 20 years. That doesn't make the person a Rasha. It's when they have the taiva and they say okay to the taiva, that's when they become a Rasha. Similarly, when you're talking about thought, I'm just going to conclude this. Thought is not, the true transgression of thought is not when I think, let's say, something, I'm going to eat something which is not kosher. That's not the real prohibition or transgression of thought. Transgression of thought, according to Torah, based on the pasuk which we say, "V'leisos in Shmein Kriyashma." Excuse me, "V'leisos surah achir levavcha machreinich mashatem zeinim achreim," means to say there's certain thoughts which man by nature, his mind is entertained by these thoughts. This is where Torah says you are prohibited to entertain your mind with these thoughts. Hence, if you do go ahead and entertain your mind with these thoughts, the person becomes a Rasha. When a person thinks that he's going to eat treif, it's not a particular entertainment of thought. Entertainment of thought, as Al Rebbe explains, what are the... Hi, Mordechai, how are you? The particular entertainment of thought is things which are usually the way the human mind works, things which are inappropriate, immodest, right? Al Rebbe uses in the previous chapter, what is Torah dealing with? When Torah deals with this which we are prohibited to entertain our mind with, things which are immodest. That is an entertainment. Not just like some thought I'm going to one day carry on Shabbos. It's a foolish thought. It's not particularly good because it's not aligned with Ratzon Hashem. Hashem says, do not carry. That it's not the Aveira of Machshava, of transgressing in the thought, in the level of thought. Transgressing thought of a level of things which the mind is entertained, and the human mind entertains itself with. And that is what is prohibited. So, where does the person where does it begin with? Why would he want to entertain his mind? Because the heart is sending the signal to the thought. Think that. Look there. Which eyes are also is the initiation to the person's thinking about something inappropriate. Torah says there's certain things we're not allowed to look at according to halacha. When one does, it enters his thought that the person, because he allowed his eyes to look at something which Torah says he's not allowed to, so that in the end he made a decision despite that Torah says no. His heart was telling him yes. The fact that his heart tells him yes, that doesn't make him a Rashi yet. But when he deliberately looks at something or listens to something and eventually thinks about something that Torah says do not entertain your mind with, that's when he becomes a Rasha. So to encapsulate, the tzaddik, the Beinoni never becomes a Rasha because he has a taiva, because he has a desire to do or think or speak something inappropriate. It's when he crosses the threshold from the heart signal to the action, to the speech, even to the thought. And I say even because, as we all understand, as human beings, the hardest to control is one's thought. The Beinoni's thought is pure from beginning to end. He never deliberately thinks something inappropriate. It means to say the moment he realizes this is something which is contrary to what Hashem says do not think it, he will right away make sure that he will not continue. And again, you're dealing on a millisecond decision. because like when someone's going to say, yeah, within a few seconds I'll probably stop thinking about that. When you say a few seconds, stop thinking about that, it is a horrendous damage on the neshama. He's well into the territory of Russia, because when it comes to thought, seconds, even in speech, seconds can make a difference. Comes to how much more so comes when it comes to thought, seconds it plays a great role. In other words, seconds is a long time when you're dealing with something so sensitive as thought. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe uses lashon. Later, we were going to learn Alter Rebbe's lashon. The moment he notices, he says, the very split second, the millisecond, when he notices that it's an inappropriate thought, he would push it away. As we mentioned also the other day, the interesting expression Alter Rebbe pushes away with two hands, because many people, when something would come, especially in the level of thought, a little bit, throw it out officially, I'm from a yid, but one hand I'll bring it in, or allow it to stay in. Alter Rebbe says he pushes it away with two hands, and he says he doesn't allow anything, even in 1 moment or 1 millisecond in his thought, because the moment the person thinks something Torah says it's inappropriate to think, the person's a Russian, the Bain is not a Russian for a moment. So again, the taiva he might have, not only he will have, he's a regular human being. That's why we can relate, and therefore the Alter Rebbe himself asks a person not to be a Rasha for a moment. And the beginning of the 14th chapter, we are to draw ourselves to be the Beinani, because it's attainable to us. We can understand it, we could relate to it. We know that we're not tzaddikim, and we know that as human beings we do constantly have these temptations, these signals which are sent to our thought, speech, and action. But we also know that we are in full control. Nobody's going to tell me to eat that, do that. No one is going to tell me to speak that when Torah says do not. And nobody's going to, even something so sensitive like thought, nobody could tell me what I'm going to think. The moment the person comes to that realization, right, that this is chas v'shalom, a thought that I'm not supposed to think, he would completely seize the moment, in this millisecond, push it away.
Maybe about a tzaddik moment, but there's no tzaddik moment.
Oh, there's a tzaddik moment. I didn't think I would have to repeat that as well. But you're mentioning something, you're going to have to ask a new permission over here from the people, but I'll still say very briefly, the Beinani has a tzaddik moment as well. Now, the Alter Rebbe says it, the Beinani is a tzaddik moment, which is precisely in the time of davening. Davening is a tzaddik moment for the Beinani. And just for this very reason, by davening... No. I'm just saying it because to go ahead to understand the Beinani, we didn't have to enter that, but you're mentioning it. I'm saying with positive energy, saying that you're mentioning it is good you're mentioning it, because we could all review that point as well. The time of davening, because the time of davening a person could not only follow Hashem's, the purpose of davening is not only that I'm going to do what Hashem wants, or I'm not going to do what Hashem wants. The purpose of davening, that it's a heartfelt experience. What are you feeling? You're feeling God. You're feeling a love to God. You're feeling a closeness to God. So feeling a closeness to God will never go together with feeling any heart signal to the heart to something which is the opposite of God and godliness. Where it is, and therefore the whole experience of davening by definition is a kind of tzaddik experience, which is again not only being pure on the thought, speech, and action level, but being pure or completely having a godly experience on the heart level as well, because that is by davening, by definition, by davening. And that, if you think about it, that's the life of the tzaddik. The only thing is by the Beinani, it's after davening, he slips back into being the Beinani, way we described before, the non-davening Beinani, that is hard. He goes out of shul, and all of a sudden, 5 minutes before, he was in love with Hashem, and he goes out of the shul, all of a sudden he has challenges, things which are the antithesis of God and godliness. What happened? The answer is that is the gift, the bonus is given to the Beinani, that in the time of davening we explain why, what is it special at the time of davening. In the end of the day, Alter Rebbe says it's not about the Beinani, because the Beinani did never transform himself. It's about a certain window which opens up from above, which is given like a bonus to the Beinani, that you can daven and you can become, for those few moments, you can become a tzaddik, or rather you're on the level of tzaddik because it's a heart expression. That is davening by definition. But after that, he slips back into the regular state of the Beinoni, where the heart could be driving somewhere completely in a different direction, and not only different direction, but in an opposite direction than godliness. Then he has to really control, right? When you love somebody, you don't have to control yourself to speak good about the person, or think good about the person, or do good to the person, because if you're in love with somebody, you're consequently doing all those good thinking, speaking, doing for the person. But when you're after davening, you're controlling yourself, that your thought, speech, and action should be aligned with the Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Controlling, by definition, means that your heart is going in a different direction. That's the after davening experience of the Beinoni. So the tzaddik, in a sense, is that Beinoni. It's like that all 24 hours in that experience of the heart being completely in love and connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, while the Beinoni has it as a bonus given to him by davening. And why does he deserve such a bonus? The Rebbe later says it's so important for us. That's why davening is so important. Even though in the end of the day we say the same words, Shachas Mincha Mayra, because in the Beinoni, in one's healthy right mind, which is aligned with a famous Gemara, the Gemara says in Brachas that halavai, a person would daven the whole day. Why would it mean halavai, a person would daven the whole day? Because if you think it, this is an expression of the Gemara. Because if you think about it in these terms, if you can be in La La Land, in the tzaddik land, right? It depends on you. If I'm going to daven another 5 minutes, it means to say I could be in that utopia state for another 5 minutes. And if I could be 10 minutes and 20 minutes and maybe a whole day. So this is beautiful for me, because it's not the struggle. It's being there. The only thing is, in the end of the day, most of us cannot afford to daven a whole day. We do Eisa Shalom, we get back to things, and we have our purpose. Somebody has their mission and their goal and their objective. And in the end of the day, going out there and transforming the world, making the world a dwelling place for Hashem, starting from learning Torah, but it's all out of that unique, special experience of davening. And therefore, the idea, ideally, the best thing for the Beinoni, daven a whole day, because it's all the way there. But practically he's not. But what happens after davening? How should he feel about his reality? He was just in love with Eibush, and all of a sudden he has other challenges. What should he feel about it? Don't feel bad. That's who you are, as long as you're not the tzaddik. When do you become the tzaddik, by the way? It's when the Eibush decides you're going to become the tzaddik. As long as the Eibush, how do I know the Eibush didn't decide I'm not going to become the tzaddik? Because I know that I have the struggles. I don't have to look for any special proof that I'm not a tzaddik. The fact that I walk out in the street and I know I have to control, make sure that my thought, speech, and action remain pure, that's the biggest proof that I'm not the tzaddik. Because if David should decide I should be the tzaddik, I wouldn't have this. And if I do, it means that I'm not. So how am I going to go about it? Or I could fall into despair. Who's the real me? When I'm middle of davening or after davening? The answer is, middle of davening is one you, and after davening is another challenge you have. Therefore, hence serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with joy and gladness of heart in this new experience which is presented of you as the Beinoni, which is not in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the heart is already, the Nefesh Bahamis pipes up and comes up to the surface and has its own messages. And at that point I have to control my heart and the signals of my heart to maintain a pure thought, speech, and action. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
When you were saying that it's not so good when the thoughts about unkosher food come, something
it's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not, so we'd say, but I forgot which tzaddik said that when we say, for example, no, we can't eat pork, and said, no, you should say that I would love to eat pork, but what could I do? My Father in heaven doesn't allow me.
Right. So in a sense, you're saying more than I said. In other words, in the same token, a normal, healthy Fri Jun is not going to, be driven on a constant basis to eat something which is not kosher. But when it comes to mind, this is exactly what the Gemara is saying. It comes to mind, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just human if you had a temptation to eat something which is not kosher.
I saw that it's like
a good chocolate bar. Come on.
So that's just about things like this. To say something which is, something which is mamish pork. Let's say when you mention pork, I'm saying, right? We shouldn't.
I got that good chocolate.
In a sense, that's already by a Fri Jun that's already completely negated. Like so, the average Fri Jun, the moment he realized he ate something which is really busted b'chol, they said the average Fri Jun, it becomes disgusted with it. We throw up. But sometimes they can say something which is like a mediocre. I don't usually eat that because I don't eat chalav akum, because I know that there's a mitzvah to eat chalav Yisrael. this is, like I say, it catches your eye, and then you start saying maybe today yes, and maybe this is like, these mediocre gray areas. That's where we could, not everybody in his own level. I don't think these two people have the same challenges, but there's no question, not everything we're so, like you say, ekeldik from. There's certain things we're already a little more inviting, but if we don't eat it, because we know that, like we said, it's a little bit poison, as we said in the very beginning. It's not, that if we put kashrus in that context, or we know that in our standard, everybody to his own. In our standard, I eat this and I don't eat that. So when the desire comes, I have a taiva to actually consume it. That doesn't make me a rasha. It's when I take it and I unwrap it and I put it in my mouth. So if I thought about it, like you say, as the Gemara says, this is a normal case that I have it, I'm interested, but I'm not doing it because Hashem's told me not to do it. That's the BAYT. Okay, so we're going to go on. So we said that we're holding actually v'afal pikein eini nikrat tzadik klal. Today's v'afal pikein eini nikrat tzadik klal. So we were speaking about this very idea that the Beinoni, by definition, has the complete ability to govern mind over heart. And the Alter Rebbe said something beautiful, always also worth repeating, that the Alter Rebbe explained that in the way man was created, and he doesn't even attribute it to the Yid. We brought out this, I think it's a very beautiful point. The Alter Rebbe doesn't even attribute it to the Yid. He said human being was created in a way that mind governs over heart. So it's not something revolutionary in our makeup. Like could someone get used to walking on his hands? Yes, many people can, and they perform in that way, but the average human being instinctively walks on his feet. Right? The same thing Alter Rebbe says, the way man was created inherently, mind governs over heart. Means to say the heart could send many signals to the person to think, speak, or do contrary to Ratzon Hashem, but the mind will govern over the heart and say no. Will the mind transform the heart, that the heart should not send signals? Also not, because he's a Beinoni, he's not a tzaddik, but he could establish that precedent and say, it's not aligned with Ratzon Hashem, hence I'm not going to enter in that territory, not even a bit. Because the moment I enter into that territory, I'm a rasha. The Beinoni is not a rasha even for one moment. So the question is, or rather here what Alter Rebbe is getting to is, at the end of the day you're dealing with someone so pure. Everything he does is aligned with Ratzon Hashem and Hashem wants. May it be licentious, he never transgresses. And again, we don't mention so much, but again, it works in the midst of the positive side as well. Excuse me. All his actions are aligned with Ratzon Hashem as positive actions. He does every mitzvah, and he learns every opportune time to learn Torah. He learns Torah. But when it comes to, so that's in his action, and in his speech is also pure. It doesn't speak anything which Torah says do not speak, and all his speech are utilized in speaking words which are associated with Ratzon Hashem. May it be words of prayer, words of learning Torah, or words of kindness to another person. That's the Beinoni. Comes to thought, he never transgresses, he never entertains his mind with something which Torah says do not entertain your mind with. Never, as never. And if it, on the positive side, his mind is always thinking in a way, the way God wants a Jew to think. Were thoughts of Torah, thoughts of thoughts of godliness. In other words, how much as a human being could perceive his Creator, or thoughts of kindness, how to implement, to plan in his mind how to do a good deed to another person, maybe a good deed, a favor, physical favor, a spiritual favor. These are thoughts which are aligned with Ratzon Hashem. That's the Beinoni. So apparently, you look at such a person, you say, well, that's really a tzaddik. Someone who's pure 100% in his thought, speech, and action, that's the kind of the quintessential tzaddik, one would say. The answer is no. He's very far from a tzaddik, because his heart is completely, his nefesh habahamis, the heart of the nefesh habahamis, is completely intact. And that's what Alter Rebbe, this is what we're holding. V'afal pikein eini nikrat tzadik klal. He's not at all called a tzaddik. Because Yisr in Hazeh Shaler Nefesh Alikis Alachesha V'Sichel Shalaklipa Nitchem Meila, this superiority, or this governing, which the godly soul, the light, which manifests from the godly soul on the darkness and the silliness of the klipa, which is again the spirit of impurity, hanitcha memela, which is pushed away on its own, which means with that decision, that firm, determined decision of the godly soul, no, I am not going to allow this in my thought, speech, and action. And yes, only allow the thought in my thought, speech, and action. Only thought, speech, and action was aligned with Ratzon Hashem. Is Einei Ella B'Shleisha Levushim Anal. It's only in the three garments, thought, speech, and action. And hence he cannot be called a tzaddik, because V'lei b'mehusav atzmusa al mehusav atzmusa shel haklipa. The core, the essence, as we said, what is the core and the essence? The core and the essence is the intellect and the feeling and the emotion. The intellectual experience and the emotional experience of the godly soul have not tackled, have not transformed the intellectual and namely the emotional experience of the nefesh bahamas, of the animal soul. That is the core, like we learned in Perek Gimel, that the core, right, there's the garments, which is thought, speech, and action, and the core of the both nefashes, the core is the intellect, our cognizant faculty, our seichel, our cognizant faculties, and then our emotional faculties, that is the core of the nefesh bahamis and the core of the nefesh elikis. And the core of the nefesh elikis is not dominant over the core of the cognizant faculties and the emotional faculties of the nefesh bahamis, of the animal soul. The core of the animal soul is very much intact. So hence he cannot be called a tzaddik. That's what on the essence of the klipa. Because because the core and the essence of an animal soul, which comes again klipa from the impure energy, impure forces, impure spirits, which is stationed on the left side of the heart. As we remember, that's what that's the name, namely the station of the nefesh bahamis. It's not budged. It's not only not thrown out, it's not only not transformed, it's not budged from its place after that bonus of davening, which again she'ein, after the davening, she'ein ishpei avas Hashem, again illustrating the time of davening when the fiery love or the flaming fiery godly love is in a very manifest, in a very obvious position in the heart of the Beinani, b'chol ha'yimani, in the right side. In other words, that is the experience of davening, that the fiery love of the godly soul is completely overwhelmingly tackles and governs over the animal soul. Means say the animal soul does not express itself by davening, because if there's a love in the heart of the Jew by davening, it's to Hashem. But achar hatfilo, after that experience, it has not budged from its place. It's completely intact. The same, and the only thing is, it's completely the same, and therefore, how could you call him a tzaddik? He has the same nefesh bahamis as anybody else, and
it didn't transform an iota.
Not a iota.
Even if we do a mitzvah, there's no transformation
on the core and the essence of the nefesh bahamis. That seems like a big waste of time, no? But we'll get there as well. Very annoying, but we'll get there as well. In the end of the day, what plays a role is our thought, speech, and action. Not so much the core. And we could just say one thing, because Al Rebbe alludes to it over here. There is something, when, in the end of the day, something, what? So you could say might as well give up, because you're not. It's like somebody who's putting on band-aids instead of healing internally, right? The answer to this is, first of all, there is no question that something has to be dented in the nefesh bahamis. But Al Rebbe doesn't negate the fact that something could be, but like nitcha klal means it doesn't budge. It doesn't budge from its place. Something doesn't budge from its place. A mean person is not budging. You can't throw him out of the room. You can't make him an ally. You can't make him a good person. Not budging. But does it mean that he always, every second when he stands determined in his place in the room, does it mean that every second he's being mean? If he's around good people, could be that something is going to affect him. In the overall, it says V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, and then some the person could somewhat have an impact or explain the animal within him. No, how much could you be an animal? Aren't we here to be human beings, or beyond the human being, be Yidden, which are Nemonim, which means with an integral connection to a connection rather with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with honesty and integrity, in a way that we should be a little more transcendent? So the Nefesh Bahamis is not going to budge. You could stay with it for all your life till the Eibishter decides you're going to be a tzaddik. But even when it's not budged, it could be that it's dented in different ways. In other words, to translate it in actual terms, there's many times that we tell our Nefesh Bahamis, it's enough to be the behemoth. How much are we? The person tells himself, how much animalistic am I going to allow myself to be? In other words, especially when the person exercises this milchama, this war, and he's successful with his war of the Nefesh Bahamis. In other words, the Nefesh Bahamis, the signals of Nefesh Bahamis, which are dire to enter into start speech action, and he constantly says no to it. And as we all know, these are challenges which could come not 50 times, they could come 100, maybe 1,000 times in a day. So when one exercises this constantly, there's no question that something is eventually going to change. But to say that you threw it out, you pushed it to the corner, Alter Rebbe says no, leinitcha klal. And how do we know we didn't? Because walk outside the next day, I have the same type. And I have walk outside 10 years later, I have the same desire. And I have to control myself. By definition, when you say control myself, that itself says the Nefesh Bahamis, the energy of the Nefesh Bahamis is extremely intact, and not only intact, it's potent. That's the reason why I have to control myself. The mere words control myself means to say the Nefesh Bahamis, the potency of the Nefesh Bahamis is so evident. So the only thing is, this is the importance of davening, and what we gain from davening as well, is that it, in a very, very deep level, it somewhat establishes this reality, this godly reality, which we experience in the time which we daven, in a way that it comes, it fills our hearts, it fills our experience. Again, that is by definition, the experience of davening. But when we exercise the davening time and again on a daily basis, or in a few times a day, when again it fills our entire experience for the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 40 minutes a person davens, what it does is that even after davening, when that kind of subsides, the fire completely goes down. Yet, in a very subconscious level, that reality of Einid Mulvadi, the godly reality, somewhat, even though it's submerged at the time, because again, the davening experience of davening is pretty much over, but in a very, very deep level, a hidden level, it exists, and it gives us the energy, despite, Alter Rebbe says we have it inherently that mind governs over heart, but it gives another dosage of energy to that mayach, to that brain, to the intellectual dimension of man, which usually says no to the Nefesh Bahamis. It gives it another godly dosage in its war, in other words, to make it easier in its war, in its challenge, in its fight, if you will, over the Nefesh Bahamis. And that's Alter Rebbe says, the inner, it doesn't fill the entire experience after davening, because that's gone. But innerly, there exists a hidden love. And what love is that? That's the love of the fact that I'm a Yid, and that will never go away from me. I have a neshama, and never go away from me, even after davening. And that neshama is a chelik of the kamimal. It's a part of God, like a child is a mere extension of the father, of his parents. And the same thing, a Yid has a chelik l'kami mal mamash, a part of Hashem that'll never go away from me. The only thing is, by davening, the godly reality fills my entire experience, my intellect, and from my intellect it produces love and fear, and again, a love and fear which fills my heart. That's again the idea of davening. After davening, that comes down, but the Ava Masuteres, the inner, hidden love, which is the natural, innate natural love of a Yid to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which never goes away, that always remains, yet in the same token, that does not make him be the tzaddik, because the tzaddik's experience 24 hours a day is like the Beinoni, which his whole heart and mind is filled with a godly reality. in the time of davening. So that's what he says. After davening, the Nefesh Bahamas doesn't budge from its place. The only thing it has is in hidden love, which is the natural love that the Nefesh Elikis has to Hashem. Like the child, even in a state when he's not experiencing or love to his parents, does not take over his whole experience, and he's in a different world, he still has that deep attachment to his parents. And similarly, the Nefesh Bein, even after davening, he has that, but it's not on the surface. It's not, his experience does not fill his whole mitzvahs, his whole, it's not a complete, his heart is not full of Avos Hashem after davening, and his mind is not full of understanding or appreciating any understanding of the reality of Hashem. So therefore, what happens then? The foolishness of the evil of the Nefesh Bahamis, which comes again in a very strong and a revealed and obvious part of his, and it fills his heart, in the left side, that he's able, the same Beinani, which a few minutes before, was literally in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after that experience of davening, his Nefesh Bahamis his Avas Taiva could develop a desire and a lust to all physical matters, worldly physical matters. And Al Rebbe adds, things which are permitted, and obviously even things which are permitted, which in the life of the Beinani, which was completely negated in the time of davening. When one exercises a real davening and he's appreciating the davening, you're going to put a plate of cholent in front of him at the time of davening. He's really not interested if he's really exercising a true davening. And again, we're not talking about the time, because sometimes within davening itself, not every moment of davening is that experience of exhilarating experience, or the experience of ecstasy in what davening is all about. But let's say when a person reaches there and you're going to put a good, like you say, a chocolate bar, he's really not interested, because right now he's in experiencing, you could even say, an intimate relationship with God, and they're going to put a chocolate bar. He's abhorrent for the moment with a chocolate bar. So that's the Alter Rebbe says, after davening, that could come back instantaneously, being beheter. He was just in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, now giving love with the chocolate. But now the Rebbe adds more than that. Bein be'isur chas v'shalom. It can be something which is even prohibited, where he knows that Torah says do not, and again in the context of thought, speech, and action, Torah says do not speak, do not think, do not do, and he could have a taiva, a signal from his heart, yes, speak that, do that, or think that. Ki ilu lo yispalel klal. The moment when he's not davening, it's as if he never davened. And I heard from a few people, but it's famous. Machsid and Alter Rebbe added, the Alter Rebbe was very precise in his words. The Alter Rebbe was very, very precise, not only in every word, but more than that, in every letter which he wrote. And we spoke about it the other day. The Alter Rebbe says every letter, he once indicated that every letter he wrote in the Tanya, he thought through the entire Tanya before writing the next letter. And obviously we're talking about minds, some minds like the Alter Rebbe, not like the average mind. But here the Alter Rebbe added klal. What did Alter Rebbe have to add klal? Because kilolei spalos if he didn't daven. But the Alter Rebbe added klal in a sense, you could even say, as much as it is a setback for the Beinani, like you were saying before, what's the point? You lose it all in a spare of a moment. But in the end of the day, it's encouraging, because when one knows this, that after davening, when he really believed that he was connected on the most profound levels, and like we said, it says in many svarim that the whole idea of davening is not only in the most profound level, the intimate levels with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the peak of davening. He's face to face with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's an enormous emotional experience. Again, to say it is an intimate relationship with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then after davening, 5 minutes later, he goes out to the street, and all of a sudden he realizes he has a total new set of challenges that could be detrimental for this Beinani, and really give up there, because he's really lost who's the real me. So the Alter Rebbe, as much as this in a sense, sends a setback to the Beinani and says, this is terrible. But on the other hand, it's encouraging when the Beinani has to actually implement and fulfill and stand on guard and on duty with his mandate of serving, being an Eved Hashem, serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eved Hashem, to constantly serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This sets enormous clarity. Now that's what Alter Rebbe did not just say Kilo Le'ispalo, he did daven Kilo Le'ispalo Klal. It's not there at all, but I was just davening and I just loved God. How could this happen? Alter Rebbe says, Klal, you lost that experience at the moment you finished davening. Why? What did I do wrong? You did nothing wrong. That's who you are. You're the Beinani. So again, as much as this is something which is discouraging, this is enormous. It's enormous clarity that Alter Rebbe adding, saying the word Klal to say that forget about it. Don't fall into despair and don't lose yourself. This is a new challenge you have. Okay, we'll stop over here as we cross the time. Have a great night, everybody.